Thanksgiving is almost here, and if you are looking for something indulgent that you can put on your dessert table and not be too concerned about the bites, points, and calories it's using up, I've got the perfect solution for you here. This is my magic caramel apple pie, but I'll show you how to make just plain apple or apple cranberry if you prefer. So get ready to add a little magic to your holiday dessert table because I'm going to show you how to make this coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today I am going to keep up the trend that I've been doing lately of magic pies, and just in time for Thanksgiving, I'm going to be doing an apple pie. But you don't have to make the pie as I'm going to do it. I'm going to be making a caramel apple pie, but I will let you know how you can also do just an apple pie or an apple cranberry pie, or even a pear pie. But before we get into all of that, let's go over the ingredients. I have here my cooking spray, of course. I'm going to be spraying a 9-inch pie plate. This one's actually 9.5. That's the only one that I have, and it works just fine, but a 9-inch is what it calls for. Here I have 3 large apples that have been peeled and sliced. Now, I didn't have 3 large ones, so I had 1 large one, 2 mediums, and a small. You could do 4 mediums or 6 smalls, and then you can peel them and slice them, but you don't have to peel them if you don't want to. I prefer peeling them because Paul's not a fan of the skin texture, and baked into the pie, I'm not sure that I am either. I prefer them peeled. Now, if you wanted to make this just an apple pie, you would just leave that as is. If you wanted to make this an apple cranberry pie, you would get rid of one of the large apples and replace it with a cup of cranberries. So that's the only change that you would really have to make if you were to make that pie. Here I have 1/2 cup of flour. Now these magic pies that I've been doing are based on the old Bisquick Impossible pies. And so this is going to replace the Bisquick as well as a couple of other ingredients. Here I have 1/3 cup of walnuts that I have chopped fairly small. It doesn't have to be too small, but you do want it to be able to disperse throughout the pie. But those are optional. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, but the bites, points, calories, and macros that I will be giving you at the end do include using the walnuts. Here I have 2 eggs at room temperature. Of course, all of my ingredients are at room temperature because they will come together more easily. Here I have 1/2 cup of almond milk, and you can use whatever kind of milk that you prefer. You don't have to use almond milk. Here I have 2 tablespoons of unsweetened applesauce. That's going to help enhance the apple flavor and also give us some moistness. Here I have 1/3 cup of caramel sauce. Now the one that I'm using is Walden Farms caramel syrup, so it's a little looser than some others. If you were going to use like Smucker's, which tends to be a bit thicker, I would use about a tablespoon of hot water just to thin that down a little bit. And again, if you don't want to make this a caramel apple pie, you don't have to use that at all. Here I have 2 tablespoons of brown sugar replacement. You could use granulated, but I prefer the caramel notes in the brown sugar, especially since I'm doing a caramel. But even with the regular apple pies, I think the brown sugar, it really enhances the cinnamon, but you can use granulated if you prefer. Here I have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And those are all of the ingredients. Now, typically, I would do this in a blender. And I've shown others that I have done in a blender, and I will be showing another one this Sunday in a collab. I'm going to be doing a maple pecan pie, so get ready for that. That one I'll be using the blender for, but I figured I'd show you just in case you don't have a blender or don't want to mess up your blender. I'm going to show you how to do it with an electric mixer. But let me shuffle a few things around and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, I sprayed my pie plate already. I have my apples and I'm going to sprinkle over the teaspoon of cinnamon and just toss that to coat all of these apples and get that cinnamon flavor spread throughout. Now here you could also use apple pie spice if you prefer, or add a little nutmeg, a little ginger. You can do this as you want to do it. You don't have to do it the exact same way that I'm doing it. And I sliced the apples about a 1/4 inch thick. I didn't mention that earlier, but that is in the recipe. So now that those are dusted in cinnamon, I'm gonna add in the walnuts and toss those through. This is just to get them mingled in there before I add the caramel sauce, which is what the next step is, to pour in the caramel and get all of that goodness out. If you're spending the bites, points, or calories on something, you want to make sure you're getting it all out. And again, just toss that. But if you were just going to do this as an apple pie, you would just toss the cinnamon and the apples, and you could add the walnuts or any nut that you prefer. And in place of the caramel sauce, you would sprinkle on a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar replacement if you were doing just the apples or the apples and cranberries. That is nicely coated. So I'm going to bring in my pie plate and I have it sitting on top of a baking sheet just because it will get fairly full, and with my little spasms possibly happening, I don't want to spill anything. So I'm keeping it on a pie plate also in case anything happens to spill or bubble over. I don't have to worry about messing up my oven. Now I'm just going to put all of my apples in here and spread that out on the bottom of the pie plate. I'm not going to put them flat against the bottom because I do want the pie mixture to seep in around those apples and get in between there. And then I'll set this over here. And now give me a second while I move a few more things around. Now for the pie crust aspect, what I'm going to do, because I'm using the mixer, I'm going to combine the wet ingredients and then add in the dry. If you were doing this in a blender, you could just throw it all in at once. And you could also just whisk this. It is a little more difficult to incorporate the flour fully. You do have to whisk it a bit longer, which is why I prefer the electric mixer. And you'll notice that I am using the same bowl that I mixed the apples with the caramel sauce and cinnamon. We want those flavors to permeate throughout the dish, throughout the pie. So I'm just using the same exact bowl and not cleaning it out. So I'm gonna add in the almond milk, the eggs, applesauce, and the brown sugar replacement. Now, why am I adding the brown sugar replacement here? Well, I have mentioned in other videos that sugar is often considered a wet ingredient because it will incorporate into the wetness, but especially with the brown sugar replacement, which tends to clump like brown sugar should, I like to have it in there so that it helps to break up the brown sugar before I add in the dry ingredients. So I'm just going to start breaking that up a little bit with the beaters and then just give it a whir. And now I'm just going to take my spatula and just look and see if there are any clumps of brown sugar remaining, and there don't seem to be. So I'll also scrape down the bowl and get any of that residual caramel off the sides. And now I'm going to add in the flour, baking powder, and salt. And yes, typically I would mix those things together in a typical recipe, but because of the way we're working this, I don't mind having them go in separately because the mixer will help to blend them, and the blender would definitely get them incorporated. So I'm just going to start off by mixing that flour in there so I don't get a big flour shower. And once the flour is wet enough and it's not going to fly all over, I'll give it another whir. Okay, and that looks pretty good. All of the flour seems to be incorporated, which is exactly what we're looking for. And if there are a couple of the little lumps in there, don't worry, they will work themselves out in the oven. So now I'm gonna set this aside and bring back in our apples, and then just pour this right over the top of our apples and scrape out anything that is staying in there because you want to get all of that out. And then any apples that are sticking up out of the mixture, I am going to push them down, and that'll allow me to get this evened out and get some of our magic crust seeping down into the apples. All right, so now this is going into a 350-degree oven for about 45 to 55 minutes. You want the center to be set and a toothpick to come out clean, and then you know it'll be done. If it starts to get too brown, check it about halfway through, and you can cover it loosely with some foil, but I haven't had that problem with this one, so you may not have to worry, but if your oven runs a little hotter, you may want to check it. But 45 to 55 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay, there we have the Magic Caramel Apple Pie, and it's slightly domed, but that will sink a little bit as it cools. Now that it's out, we have to let it cool, but just about 15-20 minutes if you like it warm. You can cool it to room temperature and it's still fine. It's also great right out of the fridge, or you can reheat it in the toaster oven or the microwave. But I'm gonna let this cool about 15-20 minutes and show you what a nice hot slice of this apple pie looks like when I get back. All right, so it's been about 20 minutes and the pie is still warm to the touch. I'm just going to run my knife gently around the edge, just make sure nothing's sticking before I cut. Now this is going to serve 8, and the pie plate that I have has these little nodules on the inside. I usually use those as a guide to get even portions by counting and making sure I'm getting in between. And you do want a sharp knife when you're cutting into this, and you want to kind of poke down through any apples, because that way if you try to just pull, it's going to maybe pull the apples with it. So just let me get this cut up. All right, so now I'm going to show you one serving of this pie, and there you have it, a Magic Caramel Apple Pie. And again, you can do just apple, you can do apple cinnamon, that's your call. But magic, because you don't have to make a crust for it. And if you mix it in a blender, even easier. Now, as I said, this serves 8. So for one serving of this, it is only going to be 2 Better Balanced Bites or Old Blue Points. I'm on the Better Balanced plan of Healthy, which is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, which is around where their current plan is. But 2 bites for a delicious apple caramel dessert? Sign me up. And if you are following calories, the calories would be 133. And if you are following macros, the fat would be 4.9 grams. Saturated fat would be 0.8 grams. Protein would be 3.5 grams. Carbs would be 23.3 grams. Fiber would be 2.9 grams. And sugars would be 10.1 grams for 1/8 of this. You could make the portions a little smaller, but once you taste it, I don't think you'll want to. And especially for the bites, points, and calories. Definitely a treat that you can enjoy over the holidays. Now, if you enjoyed this recipe in this video, I would appreciate you doing the usual like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video, such as the one that's coming up on Sunday, where you will get a magic maple pecan pie that you could also turn into a maple walnut pie if you want. Now, if you want the recipe for this, I will link to this recipe down in the description box as well as to the blog itself. Now, the recipe will be for the caramel apple pie, but down in the notes of that recipe, I will have how you can do the cranberry apple or the plain apple pies as well. Also in the description box, there is a link to my Amazon storefront. If I've used anything on this channel that you're interested in, it could be there. Also, my Fetch rewards, my Built Bar rewards, and my social media, both my Instagram and 3 Facebook groups that I am part of. So check out that description box for all sorts of information. And now I think I will be having myself a delicious slice of apple pie, fresh out of the oven, and I'm sure Paul is eager for some too. So until next time, bye.